Hey, my name is Rowan Smith and I want to welcome you to the Training for Trekking podcast. Now, this is the world's very first podcast which is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare and conquer your upcoming hike, trek or mountain adventure. So once a week, I'm going to be giving you quality and practical information on the subjects of physical preparation for trekking, dealing with altitude and nutrition on the trail, so you can know everything you need to be doing to have the best chance of a safe, enjoyable and successful adventure. So now you know what you're in for, let's get into today's episode. Alright, hello ladies and gentlemen. Today we are talking through the Unshakeable rules of hiking training. Now, what I mean by that is these are a few really simple rules which every single hiker should aim for in their training and their preparation. And these are the things, no matter what type of training you're doing, no matter what type of trip you're doing, no matter what type of preparation you're going through, you really do need to make sure you follow these rules. Because if not, you're leaving yourself open to massive issues on your trip. Now, not to say you can't succeed if you don't follow through these rules. As we've said before, people succeed doing all types of crazy things. But if you're serious about taking your trip seriously, and you really want to make sure you are giving yourself the best chance of staying comfortable, safe, and actually getting through things, these rules 100% need to be top of your mind in your training. It doesn't matter how you get there, you just need to make it happen. So, rule number 1 is in your training, you have to get yourself comfortable with the pack weight you're expecting on your trip. Now, this might seem like common sense, but it needs to be said. If you're expecting a 15 kilo pack on your trip, or if you're expecting a 30 pound pack on your trip, you need to practice that in your training. There's no point getting to the end of your training and only being used to carrying 10 kilos or 20 pounds on your back. And then all of a sudden you've got all this extra weight in this new environment. It's just not a good idea. You need to make sure you're comfortable carrying this weight. At the very least, you at least have been able to do that weight around your local neighborhood for an hour or two. Ideally, you would have gone out some training hikes with that weight, if not more. So that's rule number 1. You need to get yourself comfortable with that pack weight, and you really need to prioritize that. Because if not, you're leaving yourself open to so many issues on the trail. Now, number 2, you need to be able to be comfortable on your feet for the equivalent of the longest day on your hike. So what that means is if you're expecting a day where you're going to be walking for 12 hours, you need to know you're going to be able to handle that. Alternatively, if you're going to have a day that's like 18 hours, some people doing crazy climbs and they might have a summit day, or some people might just be 6 or 7 hours, you need to be comfortable doing this at the very bare minimum of just comfortable walking around and being on your feet for this time. Now, again, ideally, you're going to do that, be able to hike for that amount of time. Ideally, you're going to be able to hike for that amount of time and do the same elevation you're working on your trip and get as close to that as possible. But at the very least, you need to be sure you actually can move around and stay on your feet for that amount of time. Yes, it can be inconvenient to fit that type of thing into your week or fit that type of thing into your training. And I'm not saying you have to do it every single week, but you need to be 100% confident that you can be comfortable on your feet for that amount of time. And again, ideally, being able to hike for that amount of time. It's just something you can't ignore. And it's something you really do need to tick off in your training. And there's so many people that I see that don't. And it's just such an important thing. Now, Unshakeable rule number 3 is aches, pains, and injuries need to be dealt with before your trip, because they're not going to sort themselves out on the trail. They're not going to disappear on the trail. And more than likely, when you're doing all this work and you're going day after day, they're going to get worse on the trail. So if you do have something that's bothering you, that's in the back of your mind, don't ignore it. If it's foot pain, if it's shin pain, if it's knee pain, if it's back pain, if it's shoulder pain, whatever it may be, don't ignore this in your training. This is your chance to either get on top of it or at least reduce it in some way or another. So when you're actually on the trail, it doesn't take over, it doesn't ruin your trip. The amount of stories I hear from hikers who ignored this stuff over and over and over. And then they get on the trail and it just sucks so much of the fun out of their time. It's just something you can't ignore. So if you have an ache, pain, or injury, see a physio, see a podiatrist, talk to a specialist personal trainer who can help you with that or whatever it might be, but get the help you need, do the right actions, be consistent with it, and deal with it before you go. So unshakable rule number 4 is you have to expose yourself to different angles in your training. Now, what I mean by that is hiking in itself, it's undulating, it's unpredictable. We got weird steps, ups and downs. We got different trail things, and with so many different things we need to expose our body to. And for a lot of people in their training, they'll get exposed to that in their normal hiking, and they'll go out and hike and they'll get this and that and they'll get used to all those things. And that's absolutely fine. But I know there is a significant portion of people out there who can't get out hiking in their training so much. So maybe the weather's bad, whether it's too hot or too cold. Maybe they don't have access to trails. Maybe they're super strapped for time, whatever it might be. And that's not ideal, but it's fine. You can do that. But when you're doing your training, you need to be smart about this. And you can't just do the same thing over and over and over, but you do need to expose your body to different angles. So easy ways to do this if you don't have access to hiking is if you're doing stair sessions. Switch up the stairs you're doing. Don't do the same stairs every single time. Do them for a few weeks. Go find another set of stairs that might be a little bit bigger or smaller. Go up and down, sideways, backward, well, not backwards, sideways, the other sideways. Take 2 steps at a time. Take 1 step at a time, or whatever it may be. And those little changes, they'll go a long way. Or if you're not using stairs and you're just doing step-ups, which I know a lot of people do, don't use the same box all the time. Use something that's a little bit higher, something a little bit lower. Step it from side to side instead of just straight up, straight down. Do crossover step-ups or whatever it may be. And just expose yourself to different movements because it is super, super important. And I've heard stories of people who've been on the trail. They've done all their training on the same things in the gym or whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden they've got these weird stepping for like half an hour and it absolutely destroys them. So keep that in mind. And unshakable rule number 5 is you need to consider the group environment. Now, if you're going hiking and you're not solo, you need to keep this top of your mind in your training because quite often I hear from hikers, they'll do most of their training by themselves or with a hiking partner that they're pretty comfortable with, and they'll go at whatever pace they may be. But when they actually get on the trip, maybe the group or the people they're hiking with are a lot quicker or they hike differently or whatever it may be. And this can really, really, really throw people out. And if you're used to walking a certain pace and all of a sudden the group is quite a bit quicker than you, it can really, really tire you quickly on the trail. So in your training, go out and hike with different people. Not just the same old person every time who might be matching your pace. Do some hikes that are a little bit quicker. Do some hikes that are a little bit slower. And just practice yourself hiking with different groups. Because it does go a long way. And the amount of times I've heard from people who've really struggled with this and they've been caught up with this, it's really something pretty significant. So if you are leading into a hike and you are preparing, these are the rules you have to consider. It doesn't matter how you get there. Yes, there's better ways to get there and there's better ways not to get, worse ways to get there. And I'll talk about a lot of the better ways on this podcast, or at least in my opinion, but you need to consider it no matter what. Get your pack weight comfortable. Make sure you're comfortable on your feet for that longest day. Deal with your aches, pains, and injuries. Expose yourself to different angles and consider whatever group environment you might be going with. Keep these top of mind, make it happen, and it really does go a long way. So a bit of food for thought there. I hope that does give some people some clarity, or maybe some people a kick in the bum to sort of help them in their preparations. Now, if you do need a hand with anything, if you have any questions, if you have any issues, if you're just curious about learning more about this subject of training for hiking in general, I would absolutely love to find you in the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group. Now, in that group, I'm always happy to share extra information, answer any questions, and really dive into these things a little bit deeper than we can on this podcast. So if you were interested in finding that, that's the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group. I'll leave a link in the show notes below. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.